1 week season.
What is going on, OWS fam, DFS fam? Welcome back to the DFS Lab. I am your host, JM to Win. I'm here with my man, KTM128, Keegan. How are you doing? It's been a little while.
It has been a while.
Yeah, no show yesterday. Apologies to any of you who are dedicated viewers already. I know there are some of you who have been watching daily. So, and also thanks for the feedback. It's been awesome to get the feedback on the show. I know you guys are really loving this format. Shout out to Keegan. A lot of good feedback on you, Keegan. So
Awesome.
My little girl was sick yesterday. Keegan, sounds like your little boy is sick today, but we're powering through. So Keegan, so what we've been doing, if you're new here, what we've been doing is actually, if you're new here, let's start with this. So I've been playing DFS for 9 years. I run 1 week season, had a lot of success in DFS over the years. Keegan is my nephew. Keegan is 22. You're 22, Keegan?
Yeah.
Keegan's been playing DFS for just over a year, but he's like super hardcore into it. Has really sharp thought process. In fact, Keegan, I haven't told you this, but Mike, one of the guys who writes for the site, he texted me the other day and was impressed with your thought process and said it's a matter of time. He said probably within like the next year, Keegan will hit like a big tournament finish. But also it's like this standpoint of like Keegan being newer to DFS. So it's one of the cool dynamics about this show is we're able to do these roster builds where Keegan's able to kind of get in the driver's seat and drive the rosters. And so a lot of these shows is two people with a lot of DFS experience, a lot of DFS success, building a roster together. And so we wanted to do something different where we put somebody in the driver's seat who doesn't have as much experience and success to date. And that kind of creates more of a dynamic where if you're watching this, it's more the types of rosters that you might be building, the types of questions you might have. And then we're able to kind of walk through the rosters together. So some of the feedback that we've gotten is that people's favorite shows have been the ones where Keegan's really driving the roster more than me driving the roster, which makes a lot of sense. And so Keegan had an idea today. He already built a roster that he wanted to kind of build on air and talk through his thought process. I haven't seen this roster yet. And then we'll talk about it afterwards and we'll kind of see where I see any holes, what I want to challenge you on and what we might want to do differently. So Keegan, I'm going to pull up your screen and I'm going to just put you in the driver's seat. You go ahead and build this roster for us. I think we just saw a little teaser of it there for a second, but build this roster is going to be a roster that basically we'll put in like a single entry, 10,000 entry contest, somewhere in that range. Keegan, on to you, man. Take it away.
Yeah, actually, that wasn't a teaser. I had no idea what that lineup was. My quarterback was not Joe Burrow, so
it's just a random saved lineup in there.
Yes. It's funny because like that. This is one of the few lineups that I built. So, okay, with the quarterback, I'm gonna do Mike White. I know it's probably gonna be a popular decision this week. Maybe not though, because he's gone quiet for a week just because of the injury, and who knows? Maybe he won't be popular and chalky.
Yeah, and there's Russ had a big game against Kansas City last time. He's priced in the exact same price. Minshew's priced 100 above him. Jared Goff's priced 200 above him. Jared Goff, the Lions are implied to score 29 points. Chiefs are implied to score 29.25, and like 49ers are 26, but we know they're not going to throw the ball. Everybody else is under that. So I think Goff will be popular. Daniel Jones might be popular again. I think that Mike White draws the eye, but it won't be like mega chalk this week.
Okay, awesome. And then like to pair him, I'm going to pair him with Zonovan Knight and Conklin. Surprising I didn't do Garrett Wilson, I know, but I had them in this lineup, and I just was like, you know what? I can't afford Garrett Wilson, and you'll see why here in a minute. So I was like, I'll just switch over to Conklin, who's a cheap tight end, and he's pretty good.
So was it originally Zonovan and Garrett Wilson and Mike White, and then you had to pivot down? Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then for my second running back, I guess I'll get that tight end in there.
Well, and also real quickly on this, one of the things we've talked about too is part of Keegan's process is building a lot of lineups, 70, 80 lineups sometimes in a week, but then putting them into various contests, including single entry contests. So that allows for rosters that are more aggressive than a lot of people are putting into these single entry. I'd say that probably on a 10,000 entry single entry contest $12 buy-in, I'd guess that 5,000 of the rosters are dead from the start, just because they're so conservative that even if they get everything right, like they're competing against everybody, right? So they can't really get first place. This thought process of like you might have another that has Mike White and Garrett Wilson, right? But this willingness to say, okay, this one doesn't have them. One of the things I always say is, even if like Conklin's only on this one roster, you're betting that Conklin has a huge game. And then that means that on this one roster, you're betting that like you might have Garrett Wilson on 40 other rosters, but on this one roster, you're betting that Garrett Wilson doesn't have a big game. And it's okay to like spread out those bets, especially if we're betting around like an offense or a game environment. So yeah, I mean, I like, obviously it's interesting for this to be like the first roster we're talking about, right? But we're trying to win a tournament, and we're also talking about being willing to kind of go different directions. So yeah, I like that. And I like the fact that you kind of walked through that you started with Garrett Wilson on this one and then didn't have the salary for him. And so you made this pivot down. So yeah, I'm interested to see where this salary goes now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to start with the cheap stuff first, and we're going to go defense, and we're going to grab the Saints defense here.
Wow. I don't hate it against Gardner Minshew. I don't hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking in my head, like, I think I have 100 salary left on this, and I didn't want to grab, who was it? Let's see.
The Broncos against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to choose that, so I went with the Saints. Okay.
And looking through the Saints game logs, I mean, they have a 1-point game and a 0-point game. No, not a 0-point game. That was their bye week. They have a 1-point game, a 3-point game. Everything else has been 4+ points, 4 points, 6 points, 7 points, 8 points. I mean, 2K in salary, Gardner Minshew starting. I mean, that's not bad. If you're using that salary, you're not going to get 20 points from them, right? But if you're using the salary for a player who can help you win the tournament, that isn't actually like a really interesting play this week.
All right. I like it. Thanks. I wasn't too sure about that play. So then my second running back is going to be CMC. And that's where the salary is going to be going.
We've got 6,300 left. Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of flexibility here.
Right. And then for the wide receiver, I have two decently expensive wide receivers here. We have Davante Adams. I feel like, so I chose Davante Adams because I feel like nobody's going to be on him. And it's kind of like this in my head. I already have CMC. So I'm saying that the Raiders and the Niners are going to just have a pretty big game here. And if not, maybe like they're down. Davante Adams gets a few, like a touchdown, and then just a couple long passes or something like that, you know? Either way, both going to
agree with you. I think people will be off of him this week. 3 straight down games. 4 of his last 5 have been down games, and he's playing the 49ers, who scare people off of pass catchers.
Yep, exactly. And then at my flex, so I have 2 other wide receivers, but I'll do the flex first here. At my flex, I have another expensive piece. I have Justin Jefferson. Why I chose him, I don't remember, but I guess we can talk more into that here in a minute.
Yeah, because he's Justin Jefferson, because he put up 42 against Green Bay in week 1.
Yeah. Okay, then my last 2 pieces, we have Dortch, and I'm pretty sure I chose him because there's some injuries. I don't think Kyler Murray's going to be back, but I mean, Dortch, just because he can still get me like.
Yeah, he's had surgery and everything, so he's out. But I don't know about Colt McCoy, though. I don't know if Colt McCoy will be back or if it's Trace McSorley again. But either way, I mean, Dortch, the week where he had like no usage, it was weird to me because he's so consistently. I think he had 11 catches on 11 targets the other night, and DeAndre Hopkins had like 1 catch on 10 targets. Like Dortch, he's not flashy, but he gets open, you know, and there's a lot of value in that for sure.
Yeah, and he's had 13, 15, 17, 22, 22.
Yeah, it's all about the usage. If the usage is there, I mean, he's a super sharp play, especially at 3K in salary with pricing coming up before he had his game the other night.
Yep. And then with Marquise Brown being injured, I thought he'd maybe get a little usage bump there.
Yeah, so Brown was actually, I think they said that he was benched. Like he didn't start and then he was
benched.
Yeah, his snaps were limited from being late to practice this last week, I think was what happened. But at the same time, so what was weird was the week when Dortch was active, healthy, he got like no run. I think that Rondell Moore was out that week as well. And so I expected Dortch to be used in the slot. And what they ended up doing was they kept Dortch on the sideline like all game. They ended up using DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown in the slot. So I'm curious what they do this week, but I wouldn't mind rolling the dice on this one and basically saying, like, look, if Dortch is playing in his normal role at 3K, he's going to put up 15 plus points almost as a given, right? So, yeah, I'm fine rolling the dice on that. And that's one of those things that I'm going to have to dig into deeper as we get into the NFL Edge to really get a sense of what Dortch's like range of role is this week. But at this point, if we just assume that he is playing his normal role, then I like this play a lot, obviously.
Okay, awesome. And then for my last wide receiver, we have, you really put me on this guy. Like I was not like heavily invested in this
May I guess?
Yes.
DJ Chark.
Yes.
He's by far my favorite, like sub 5K guy this week. People still just don't play it. Like pull up his game logs real quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Look at this.
17, 21, 14. And then that the game against Buffalo, he played limited snaps. Like every time he's healthy, he puts up like 15 plus points. And he's got 30-point games in his range of outcomes.
I mean, look at that. Like, how is that 4,300? Like, how?
No, exactly. Yeah.
It's crazy. So, let's hear your thoughts on this entire lineup.
Okay. So, here's the thing. One of the things that we say all the time is that DFS is not about picking players. So again, it's week 17. If you're watching this, you're probably an OWS member and you know exactly what we're talking about here because there's not many people who are like searching for new shows in week 17, right? Their bankroll is gone or they have their rhythm in place. But if you are watching this and you're new to OWS content, there are so many people who know the NFL really well and are awful at DFS. And so that's what we mean when we say that DFS is not about picking players. DFS is not about knowing who the good plays are. You have to know who the good plays are. That's no longer the edge though. The edge is understanding how to put together rosters that have a clear shot at first place finish. So from the standpoint of the players, like I don't have any concerns about the players. Like I have some holes I could poke in some of these players. Like for example, last week, so what we'd seen for several weeks was Christian McCaffrey would get 100% of the touches. And then once they had a big lead, Jordan Mason would come in and basically be the closer, right? Jordan Mason would get 0 touches. Christian McCaffrey would get all the touches. And then all of a sudden, Christian McCaffrey would get 0 touches and Jordan Mason would get the rest of them. And so it was like, okay, Jordan Mason's our closer. Last week in the NFL Edge, Mike brought up when he was writing up this game, he brought up an interesting point that, look, the 49ers are basically locked into the 2 or 3 seed. And there's very little that's going to shake them out of that. If Philadelphia wins one more game, Philadelphia is the 1 seed, right? Philadelphia is probably going to win one more game. So the 2 seed versus 3 seed is valuable. That's the difference between a home game in the second round of the playoffs and not. But also Christian McCaffrey is super valuable. So last week, Mike was saying maybe the 49ers hold Christian McCaffrey back a little bit. Don't give him his full complement of touches. And last week we saw Tyrion Davis-Price coming in the first quarter and the second quarter to mix in with Christian McCaffrey. So I do have some concerns about Christian McCaffrey in a winnable game where, and if the Eagles win, I think it's the Eagles play in the early time slot. Mike brought this up this week. The Eagles play in the early time slot. If the Eagles win that game, the 49ers are officially eliminated from the 1 seed, which is the only bye available. They'll get a home game in the first round no matter what. So again, they still want the 2 seed because that's a home game in the second round. But I could see them like basically saying, hey, let's cap Christian McCaffrey at 20 touches, right? We can win without giving Christian McCaffrey 30 touches. So that's my one big concern with McCaffrey from a player standpoint is that McCaffrey at 9K is probably going to be super popular as well because this week, right, it's thin in terms of who you pay up for. Austin Eckler has the 3 30-point games, but everything else has been like 25 and below. And I think he leads the NFL in touchdowns, 16 touchdowns on the year, and he's still having a hard time cracking 30 points, right? Because his offense just isn't humming. Saquon has 1 game all year above 26 points and was back in week 1. Jacobs is playing the 49ers defense. When we swing over to wide receiver, Jefferson's actually in a very difficult matchup. Tyreek Hill's in a difficult matchup. Davante Adams playing the 49ers defense. A.J. Brown is in a game the Eagles should control. Amon-Ra St. Brown's probably a little bit overpriced for his range of outcomes. So I say all that to say, like, when you're looking up top, like, where do I spend my salary? Christian McCaffrey really draws the eye because he's playing the Raiders. And so I think that he's going to be super popular. And I think that his chances of disappointing are higher than the field is going to give him credit for. So from like a poking holes in the players standpoint, that's one hole that I would poke. Outside of that, though, when we're talking about trying to win a tournament, one of the things that we want to talk about is like, can this roster score 200 points? And then is it like unique, right? We talked about this last week, but we used the example of when you have like the low owned guy who puts up 25 points and every time he scores, like every catch he gets, you jump over a bunch of rosters, right? And you're like watching the standings and you just keep leaping up. And so having a unique roster construction, even with popular players, it's the same thing in that, like, we used the example last week of like having Derrick Henry and Justin Jefferson together, right? They were both going to be popular, but we were like, you're moving every time Derrick Henry scores, you're just moving up with all these other Derrick Henry rosters. But then Jefferson scores and you like jump above the Derrick Henry rosters. And then you're moving up with the Jefferson rosters, and then Derrick Henry does something and you jump like, and so having these unique roster constructions is a big part of getting to first place. So from that standpoint, I mean, I adore this roster because you fit in Christian McCaffrey, Davante Adams, Justin Jefferson, and you didn't sacrifice ceiling in order to do it. Like, we've seen Mike White score 25 plus points. We've seen Zonovan Knight top 20 points. Running back's pretty thin to where a lot of these high-priced guys might only get 20 to 25. And so if Zonovan Knight gets even like 18, he doesn't need 4X his salary. He can get 17, 18 points, and he becomes really valuable if these high-priced guys don't go nuclear this week. And then you've got DJ Chark, who, as we looked at, like consistent 15, 18-point games at 4,300. Like, DJ Chark should be 5,900 is where he really should be priced, right? He just hasn't put up a 30-pointer yet, and so his price hasn't jumped. Greg Dortch, if he is playing, if he's getting the snaps, like that game a few weeks ago, he literally like didn't see the field at all. I think his over-under for receiving yards was like 22.5, and he didn't get that. Like, I think he had 0 catches in that game. And so, again, that's one that I have to dig into to see what his expected usage is this week. But if his expected usage is what it was last week, he should be priced at 5,500. And so you're getting like Chark, who's really not a 4,300 player. You're getting Dortch, who's really not a 3K player. Conklin is really the only – Conklin and the Saints are kind of the only weak spots here, right? Like, Conklin can't go for 25. The Saints can't go for 15 points. But if what I said at the beginning was, as long as you're using the salary for upside, then it's worth it, right? The Saints don't have to be the team that wins you the tournament. And a lot of times we see people get on like the Saints and then play like a bunch of mid-range guys who really can't go over 25 points. So the fact that you use these savings to go Jefferson, Davante, Christian McCaffrey, all guys who can score 40 plus points, I think it's super sharp to use those savings in that way. And then like the roster construction, nobody is going to have Christian McCaffrey, Davante Adams, Justin Jefferson on a roster together. So if all three of them hit, that was kind of my a few weeks ago when I finished 3rd in the Game Changer and 10th in the Slant and finishing at the top of a bunch of other tournaments. It was the only guys I thought on that slate could score 30 plus were Miles Sanders, who was 6,500, so easy to fit, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. And so everything from my standpoint was like, how do I fit these guys together? Because if these are the only 30 pointers, I'm just moving ahead of everybody. So I could poke holes in like Mike White being a foundational piece, but if we're building a lot of rosters, we're going to have some Mike White. Like, Goff is a better play this week than Mike White because the Lions will probably score like 30 plus points and the Jets might only score 21 to 24 points, right? But if we're building a bunch of rosters, what's cool here is I highlighted those other quarterbacks in the same price range, right? Minshew and Goff and even Russ. Russ plus Judy would be a really interesting stack this week. And now we have this salary structure set up where we managed to fit in 3 high-priced guys, right? So you could almost like keep Dortch and Chark as like foundation pieces and build like 20 variations of this roster where it's like some have Mike White, some have Jared Goff, some have Russell Wilson, some have Gardner Minshew, maybe some pivot from Christian McCaffrey down to Eckler. Maybe some of them, instead of having who are the other high price wide receivers, you can maybe mix in Tyreek Hill instead of Davante Adams, instead of Justin Jefferson, maybe even mix in a little bit of AJ Brown. So yeah, what I really like about this too is it's going to be hard for people to even envision getting 3 of these super high price guys onto a roster together. And now you've done it in a way where you didn't really sacrifice ceiling at your cheaper spots for the most part. And so you can kind of see like, oh, well, now I can build this so many different ways and mix and match the high priced pieces, right? And then instead of trying to predict who has a big game, you're just predicting that this salary structure is so unique that it has a clear shot at first place with a ton of ceiling, right? And so then you just keep the salary structure and mix and match it in different ways. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on this from a player standpoint, right? Realistically, everything on here is sharp. You're going to read a lot of content this week or listen to a lot of content this week that talks about McCaffrey as like the best play on the slate. So that was just like an alternate perspective on McCaffrey. Obviously, we know that Davante Adams comes with some risk. We know that Justin Jefferson comes with some risk. Like Jefferson put up 42 against the Packers last time, but it's also a really tough matchup, right? He could put up 12 this time. Davante Adams could put up 12 against the 49ers. And the key then is, if that happens on this roster, Sunday ends, you don't look and say, oh man, this is a crappy roster because these guys didn't score points. Like we know that they're capable of also scoring like 12 to 15 points, but we know they're capable of scoring 30 plus. And so breaking out of that mindset of like, is this guy a sharp play? Is this guy a sharp play? It's why Blender on Roto Grinders will say, play whoever you want. I think that's the exact phrase. Maybe I butchered it, but it's like playing anybody, right? It's like, they're going to be there as long as you're playing good plays. It's not about what they end up scoring. It's about, do you maximize your chance of a first place finish if they have their big games? And if everybody on this roster has their big games, this is such a unique setup that you're going to be in great shape for a first place finish. So yeah, I mean, and the only other thing on here is there's like a lot of things we need to get right? This is almost like, like a 7-leg parlay, which mathematically is that much harder than like a 5-leg parlay, because we've got Mike White, Zonovan Knight, and Conklin correlated. We're saying the Jets score a lot of points, but we don't have anything brought back from the Seahawks that kind of helps drive this game environment on a concentrated Seahawks offense. And then like McCaffrey and Adams are kind of correlated, but like not really, right? Like McCaffrey can have a big game without Adams and vice versa. So it is like a lot of things we need to get right, but it's all pretty high percentage bets. And then like, if we want to focus on just this construction itself, like the construction's awesome. The way that we have this salary allocated to say, hey, how can we fit in these 3 high priced guys, especially 2 guys priced at $9K and above? I mean, that's really difficult to do and then still fit into Davante Adams. So yeah, with that, I'm going to throw it over to you for any final thoughts that you have off of what I've said or any other questions that you have off of what I've said.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love everything you said, and I completely agree. This is a very like high risk, high reward type of roster, which I would basically enter in maybe like 15,000 to like even maybe the milli maker I might enter this into, but maybe not anything lower than like 5K, you know?
Yeah. Just because it's not necessary to take on the risk. But honestly, I don't know, man. Like looking at this is a roster I'd put into smaller contests. You know, I might try to find a way. Well, it's interesting, right? Because we're converging. This is the first time we've talked about this slate, and my initial builds this week have been like, oh, maybe none of these high-priced guys hit, and the way to go this week is like a bunch of mid-range guys, and then this first roster that you're throwing in here is like 3. Like, how do we fit in 3 of the high-priced guys? Which is very much like a JM roster, right? Like it's very much like something that I'm always looking to do. And so, yeah, I'm like having to shift my thoughts away from what I see the player production looking like this week. And like from like a roster construction standpoint, this roster is aces. Like this roster is excellent. So then the only thing is like on my end, it's like, yeah, but I've been kind of seeing this slate as what if these high price guys don't hit? And then we kind of go mid-range guys, which maybe the next roster we build, we can do that just to see what that looks like. Okay. But no, I mean, I would honestly, if this were a week where I were like, man, I think Christian McCaffrey goes for 30. I think Davante goes for 30. I think Jefferson goes for 30. I think all of them can go for 40. Then this would be a roster that I would put into smaller field contests as well. Because like I said, Chark is underpriced and Dortch is underpriced. And so you're real. And if none of the other high priced running backs hit, then Zonovan Knight only needs like 15 to 18 points, which if you're wondering why I'm saying that, if you're watching this and wondering why I'm saying that, it's about like salary allocation and then like what you're missing out on, right? So if one of the high 30-point scores are always valuable. So if bunch of the high price running backs go for 30 plus and you're getting 15 from Zonovan Knight, you're in trouble, right? But if people are paying $8K and $7,500 for 25-point scores and you save $2K in salary, $2,500 in salary, and you get like a 15 to 18-point score, that salary can be better spent somewhere else because now we have Jefferson and Davante Adams that they can go for 35 plus, right? So basically, Zonovan Knight's value is kind of tied to what the higher price running backs do. But I don't think that this is a week where the higher price running backs are going to be hitting like in spades, right? Like I said, Saquon's topped 26 points once, and it was back in week 1. Austin Eckler has consistently been scoring like 20 to 25. Obviously, he can go above that. Nick Chubb has topped 33 points. What is it? I think we said 3 times in his career. Last time was 2019. James Conner isn't really capable of topping 30 points, and he needs multiple touchdowns just to get there. So, like, it's very easily a week where these running backs could all score like 22, 25 points, and your 15 to 18 pointer from Zonovan Knight is super valuable. So, yeah, it's like you sacrifice some ceiling on Conklin and the Saints, and then everything else is ceiling, and not like a ton of correlated bets, but it's still like pretty high percentage bets in terms of what you're able to fit on this roster. So, yeah, man, I like it a lot. And I would be interested to see like, yeah, fire me some text this week with like other variations of this one, because I think there's a lot of different ways you could go with this one. Cool. I think with that, we're going to wrap it up. Is that good on this one? Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap this one up. We will see you. Let's see. Today's Wednesday. So this is going live today. We are actually about to record our Thursday podcast right after this. So we will be wearing the same outfits. Don't think that we didn't shower. But we will see you back here on, I actually haven't showered yet. I'll do that after the show, but we will see you back here on Thursday afternoon. We will see you on 1 week season. And as always, we will see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend.